Today we'll do the life cycle management methods of bean. So life cycle methods of bean. So what life cycle methods are? Whenever the IOC container, this is the IOC container, and this is the bean we have. Let's say if we have a particular bean with any ID, bean B1, bean ID equals to B1, and blah blah whatever properties this bean has. So whenever the IOC container loads the bean at the time of startup, so at the time of startup of the application, it will load the bean, and at the time of shutdown of the application, it will unload the bean. Will unload the bean. So what method do you want to execute when the bean is loaded? So these methods are lifetime methods. Like in servlet we have init and destroy. In servlets we had, in life cycle of servlet we had init method, service method, and destroy method. So init method would be invoked when the servlet would be loaded. So this is when the init would be invoked, and the destroy method would be invoked when the servlet would be unloaded. And these were once in a lifetime methods. The init and the service, init and service are once in a lifetime methods. You cannot call init again and again, and you cannot call destroy again and again. Once the start time it is called, and at the unload time, shutdown time, it is destroy is called. So how do we manage these methods for a bean? So this is what is today's agenda. So if you want to load a bean and you wish to have some attributes which you want to call at the time of the bean loading, and when the bean unloads you want to flush that data, so we will write those methods in the init and destroy methods of the bean. But now how do we configure that for a bean? So for that we have three ways to configure these life cycle methods. We have three ways of doing it. Managing the life cycle methods of a bean. One is the programmatic approach. Using interfaces. Using what? Interfaces we have to use, and the implementation, we have to provide the implementation. So the interfaces which we will be using are initializing bean. This is an interface. Let it do the. This is an interface. This interface has an abstract method by the name which we have to override after properties set. After properties set. Now, why is it called after properties set? Uh, what are the tasks of an IOC container? The first task is to create a bean instance. Second task is to initialize that bean. Second is to initialize the bean object with values, and that it can initialize using a constructor, using CDI dependency injection, or using setter SDI dependency injection. And once the setter dependency injection has been done, then does the life cycle management. Does the life cycle management of the bean. So the life cycle management of the bean process is after the bean has been initialized, after the setter dependencies has been injected. So if we have an init function over here and a destroy function over here, let's say in the bean, this init function will be called when? After the setter has been called. So it is after properties set. So it is what? After properties set. So this is an abstract method which present in which interface. So if my class implements the initializing bean interface, it has to override the after property set. This will act as my init. This will be my init. And what is my destroy? For the destroy, we have another interface by the name of disposable bean. By the name of disposable bean. So this also is an interface, and this disposable bean interface has one method which we have to override, that is called as destroy. That is called as, which method do we have to override for this? We have a destroy method, so which will act as my destroy. So after property will act as init and the destroy will act as destroy. Okay, so this I am comparing with your servlets. So the servlets, if we have these names, the equivalent for them in your beans using the programmatic approach would be for initializing after property set method and for destroying destroy method. Okay. Second is by using the XML approach. You are using the XML approach, and third is by using the annotation approach. Third is by using the annotations approach. So we have three ways. Okay. Now let's understand each one in detail. So how does what the XML approach method does? We'll see that also. So XML approach method, instead of using these interfaces, directly we can go into the bean which we want to configure as ID, whatever ID we want to give to that bean, let's say bean ID B1, and there we can just write which method will act as our init and which method will act as our destroy. So we can write over there parameter as init method, and we can give any method like my init, and we can give what? Destroy method, which we can say my destroy. So we don't necessarily have to implement these interfaces. We can make our own Pojo class with whichever method should act as an initializer method and whichever method should act as a destroy method, and name them in the bean over here. So when we give ID, the class name, blah blah blah, we have to give these two attributes also. And the third is the annotation approach. No need to give anything in the bean, just whichever method which we are creating in the Pojo class. So if let's say my class, let's say if I want to insert into a database, and if I'm doing class student database, and in this class if I want to do the life cycle methods, so if I create my own method, public void my init, this will act as my initializer method, and public void my destroy, this will act as my destroy method. So I just have to annotate. So the initialization, as we know, when is the initialization done? After the setting has been done. So for that we have post construct. Annotation what? Post construct. Yeah, after the constructor has been called, and this is called when? Before the destructor is called. So pre-destroy. So we can use these annotations. Post construct and pre-destroy. So no need to give anything in the bean. We don't have to give this for the annotations part. This is not required. Just in the Pojo class, just give the method as annotate the methods. Okay. So let's start and we'll try to cover up all the three scenarios. So let's start with the first scenario using programmatic approach. So I go here, go to file, I create a new Java project, and let's say we'll give it student life cycle part 1, or you can say using programmatic approach. Okay, just a self-explanatory name to the finish it. Okay, so here we have it. Let's go, and in the src let's create a class. So I'll name it as student db, or whatever you all want to wish to name it. I have renamed it as student db. This will be my project class. Okay, now what I'll do is, if am doing database connectivity. Okay, now if I am doing database connectivity, what I want to do over here is, so if you remember, whenever we do database connectivity, when we have this driver manager dot get connection method, it will ask for three things, right? First, it will ask for the URL, so which is http colon slash slash mysql port 3306 blah blah blah, something like that. It has with the database name, like say the database is testdb. So this is the URL. Along with that, it will also ask for the username. So in our case, we would have username as root, right? And it will also ask for the password. So normally we would have the password as blank. So if we are using MySQL, this would be the URL, username and password. If we are using Oracle, something else. Okay, before that we would have a driver name. So the class dot for name, we would have a driver com dot jdbc dot odbc dot jdbc odbc driver, something of this nature we would have. So now what I'll try to do is I'll inject these four dependencies. These four dependencies which we have for database. What are the four dependencies we have? The first, we have a D name. So I'll be creating a bean, and in this bean I'll be injecting these into the Pojo class. So we'll have a property for name for D name, and it will have the value as whatever driver we wish to use, whichever database we wish to use in our application. So if you want to use Oracle, have Oracle driver over here. If you wish to use MySQL, a MySQL driver, I'll be using MySQL, so I'll be using a MySQL driver. So I'll pick up the MySQL driver over here, whichever driver it is, form dot blah 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 blah, whichever driver. Okay, then I'll be injecting the three other things also, namely the URL, which will be the URL of our database, then also the username and also the password. So I will inject these from my bean. Okay, so we'll have a dependency injection over here, and then I will call the init method, and in the init method I will create the connection. I will do the creating of the connection, class dot for name and driver manager dot get connection. I will do it where in the init method, and in the destroy method I'll close the connection. In the destroy method I will close the connection. So call dot close. And if we wish to insert a record, we'll have a insert data function, let's say, which will, let's say, if the student table has roll number, name and percentage, so we will pass the roll number, student name and percentage to this function, and it will insert that data. Okay, so this is a pseudo code I am giving, so you all can give the actual, so we'll do the practical, right? So this is enough. Pseudo code is self-explanatory. So set the percentage, and so whatever code we have to do, then prepared statement, execute update, this all part we will do that in the, and then a message to display the record has been inserted, record inserted, blah 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 blah. This we will do where this, so this will be our Pojo class, having these, having the init method. Okay, so this is our bean, right? So we'll remove this. So this is the bean. Once the bean is done, then we'll have the Pojo class over here. The Pojo class will have how many private data, how many private fields it will have. The Pojo class will have how many private fields? Dname, URL, username, and password. So if I'm creating a class student DB, I will have how many private data members, private fields, the driver name, which I will inject from where, what type is the driver name, all of type string. So just to make it clearly visible, I'm writing on different lines. String, URL, comma, private string, username, private string, password. Okay. I will also have a connection, right? Private connection, because the reason I'm making the connection a class object, because I'll be using it across multiple functions. I'll be using the connection in init also, in destroy also. So then we'll have the init function, which will create the connection. We'll have a destroy function, which will destroy, which will close the connection, so that the garbage collector can garbage collect this object. Before the garbage collector collects this object, the connection should be destroyed. And then we'll have an insert function, public void insert, which will insert the data, blah blah blah. Okay, this is my bean, this is my Pojo class, and then we'll have a driver class, which will make the factory bean, which will access the bean, the factory object. Okay, here as we are configuring the data for the life cycle, we'll be needing on the LHS a different interface. I'll show you in the practical which interface we will be using to, so it is configurable application context. It is configurable application context interface we will be using. So we will make the factory, the bean factory object of this reference of this interface. The application class remains the same. The application class remains the same. New class path XML application context. Class path XML application context. This remains the same. Here the interface reference has changed, and then here you give the path of the XML file. Okay. So as soon as the object is created and the IOC is loaded, it will call the init function, and if we wish to call the destroy function, we'll have to close this factory. So as soon as we unload it, it will call the destroy function, and then we can create, then we can call the save function over here. If you want to call the insert data function, we can call it from here. Okay. So once factory is created, now factory dot get bean we can do. What is the bean name? I have not given any bean name over here. Let's say bean id equals to b1. blah blah blah. So we can get bean, which is the bean. D1, this will return me of student DB. So I'll typecast it to student DB. I'll typecast it to student DB, and then I'll have a student DB object on the LHS. S1, let's say. And now as the init function has been called, these values have been initialized, and then directly I can say, if I want to insert the data, I will directly call which function? Insert data using S1 dot insert data, and then to call the destroy function, I will close the factory dot close. So these three files which we will prepare. So let's start. So let's start with first the Pojo class, student DB. So what are the attributes? But what are we going to add in this? Private string dname, private string URL, okay. We can add it on the same line, but I just want the program to look more legible. Private string username and private string password, and then we'll have a private connection. Okay, now as we are doing this, first thing first, what we'll have to do is import all the jar files. So we go to our application and go to build path, configure build path, in the class path add external jars, and import all the jars of 5.2 release which I have shared with you. Select all and open. Okay, apply and close. So this connection, so will be connection is from here. You can have it from MySQL connector jar also. So import them from SQL. Have a getter setter for them, because we'll be injecting through properties. We'll be injecting it through the properties, right? So have a getter setter for all these four attributes which we'll be injecting. So generate the getter setters. So go to source, generate getter setters, or don't generate for getter. Apart from connection, generate for them and generate. Okay, this is generated. Now what else? Okay, as we had told, our Pojo class will do what? It will it will implement those two interfaces. Which were the two interfaces? Initializing bean and disposable bean. Okay, so we have to say that because we are doing the programmatic approach, right? So implements which two? Initializing bean, initializing bean, comma, disposable bean, disposable bean. These two interfaces we need to import. So we can import them. Now as we have promised that we will be implementing them, so we have to give body to the abstract methods. So what is the abstract method in initializing bean? Which is the abstract method in initializing bean? After property set, we have to override it. Public void after property set, right? So let's override that. Properties set. So we'll have to override this, and we also have to override the destroy function. Okay, public void destroy. Okay, these functions have a tendency to throw checked exceptions. So say throws exception. So the one who is invoking it can catch them. Okay, throws exception. So far so good. Now what implementation we have to give, we'll give that later on, and then just make that method also which we want to make. That is, we had promised we'll have an insert data function. So public void insert data, and what are you going to pass to this function? Roll number, name, and percentage. So we'll be passing to it integer roll number, string s name, and double the percentage, and then we'll be storing that in the database over here. So the code for the database will come here. Okay, so I've just created the skeleton of the Pojo class. We'll insert. So after property set, what will we do? Create the connection object, and after this, what will we do? Destroy the connection object. We close the connection object. Okay, so now let's go to our, let's create our bean file now. So we go to source, and we go to new, and we add a new folder. So we'll be creating that over here. So we'll name it as resources. Okay, and we can give whatever name to our bean file, whatever. So I am going to create a file over here, that resources folder, and I say my config bean. Okay, I just give it now as my config bean dot xml. Okay, so now let's, as this is XML file, we have to have the DTD first. So let's copy paste the DTD, and okay, I'll copy paste the DTD over here. First, let's create the bean. Okay, so have we put this into any package? We have not put this into any student bean, into any package. So let's put that into a package first. Package, so I will give a fully qualified name in the bean ID. Package form dot enumtech dot ntt. Okay, so this is the package in which we want to put this, so we can shift this over there. So it's asking move student db to this, yeah, move it, so it has come over here. So now this is the fully qualified name of that Pojo class, so we need that over here. So bean id equals to, let's say, bean1, and class equals to, what are the class name? student db. Okay, and now what we have to give the properties to it. How many properties are we assigning to this? We are assigning it four properties. So let's start with the first one. Property name equals to, first was dname, if I'm not wrong. Dname, and what value do you wish to give to dname? So let's give it value as value for MySQL is driver com dot mysql dot vdbc dot driver. So let's open a class wherein we can have this. Let's copy paste from there. So I have opened a class over here. So this is the driver which we use for MySQL. Let's copy and paste it over here. Okay. So this is for property this. I'll just copy this. Okay, and paste it. For dname, then we had, what was the attribute we had? Let's copy them over here so that we can give them one by one. So I had for dname, now we should give for URL, right? So we have one for URL. So dname, and this is out of the window. Okay, what URL should we give? So this is the URL. Okay, from here till the, yeah, database name. So we can change the database name also. So I'll change the database name also. So maybe I'll give the database name to as Spring Core. Okay, this is done. Now we have one more for username. For username, what do we have for username? Username is root. So value for username is root, and one we have for password. So we have another for password. So just updated for this bean. Now I need to add the main root bean stack and the DTD. Okay, so we'll copy that from the previous application. Username, and this is password, and password is empty, so no need to give any value for that. Okay, so we have created this bean. Let's copy the DTD from existing bean and paste it. So if I go to my first bean, and from there I will take the, yeah, so we can take copy from here to here, and then go and paste it in our programmatic approach now. Okay, so let's go and paste it over here. So beans, and let's close the beans also. Make sense? So this we have configured. Student DB and properties. The name is D1. Okay. So Pojo class is ready. Okay. Now over here, from here we will be injecting our dependencies over here. So at what will be getting the connection at load, that is after property set will create the connection. So as soon as this loads, we are creating the connection, right, at load time. So as the so this is the init function, right? So in the init function we'll create the connection. So first thing first, what will we say? Class dot for name, and the for name requires the driver, so we have the d name up. Once this is done, then we have driver manager. Okay, we already created a connection reference up, right? Line number 12, so we'll just use that. So on equals to driver manager dot get connection, and how many things does it need? It needs first the URL, then the username, then the password. We require three things. Once this is successful, we can say a message which confirms that we have opened the connection. So connection opened. Okay. And what do we want to do at destroy type? We just need to close this connection, right? Close on dot close, and we can say that connection closed. Okay. So more or less our Pojo class. Oh no, we need to write the database function also. No. Insert. So insert, what do we do first? We'll be using prepared statement because it's a dynamic query. So in prepared statement, first we create the query, string query, string query equals to insert into, let's say, my stud, the table name is, and values we have question mark, question mark, question mark. Between three values. Okay, then we'll create a prepared statement. Prepared statement ps equals to on dot prepare statement based on the query, and then now initialize the, okay, we haven't imported this, looks like, of SQL. We use the SQL package, and now, okay, this also throws an exception. So throws, let's say we should have SQL exception, but we'll take the parent one, should not be a problem. Now set the values. Now ps dot first is set int, which is roll number is the first argument. We have roll number. The second argument is a string, so we'll have a set string. Which is s name. For the third one, we'll have a set double, which will be your percentage. 3 will be percentage. Okay. Once this is done, then we can, as it is a non-select query, we'll have ps dot execute update. Date. And this will tell us how many rows has been inserted. That will take in integer n. So if n has 1, we'll say record inserted successfully. So if n is equal to 1, we say system dot out dot println record inserted successfully, else we can say it's record not inserted. Else we can say record not inserted. Okay, this is our save function. So this my Pojo class is more or less ready. My bean configuration is more or less ready. Now let's go to our driver class. So we go to source directly and say new, add a class. Let's call it as stud driver. Stud driver. Finish. And now what we want in this driver class, we'll have to create a which interface are we using on the LHS. And I had mentioned in this slide, I had mentioned that we'll be using an interface configurable application context. So use that interface configurable application context. Whatever name you want to give to your bean factory, so you can say factory equals to new. The right path remains the same, class path, the capital C, capital P, XML application context. XML application context, and where is the file? It's in resources folder, resources slash my config bean. I've named as my config bean dot xml. So we okay, we go to the end and give a semicolon. Okay, this is not imported, looks like we'll have to import it. Import this, not imported, import this also. Okay, hit enter. Now what do we do? First, now in this factory we will call get bean factory dot factory dot get bean, and the bean name was, I guess, was it b1? Yes, it was. So factory dot get bean b1, which is of what type? Student bb, right? So we have to typecast this to student bb. On the LHS will have a student bb object, let's say s1. Why is it underlined? Because it has not been imported. So because they are in different packages, right? So import this also. Now once the life cycle have been done, simple. Okay, now but we have to insert something, right? So if we take a scanner class new, okay, let's see if we can, if I can get that over here. Yeah, then directly use this. Just copy paste this. We have a scanner class object, and then we have to accept three things from the user. That is the roll number, name, and okay, we can just do that over here. So enter roll number, enter s name, and enter percentage. That goes into A, this goes into B, this goes into C. Yeah. Scanner also has not been imported, looks like. util, okay, all set. Print, and then what is happening over here? Okay, done. This is all clean. And now when I call the save function, what was it? S1 dot, was it insert data? Looks like yes, it was insert data. So when I call insert data, I need to pass the arguments to it, right? So when I say insert data and I pass to it A, B, comma, C. Yeah. And once this is done, I need to call the destroy function also. The factory is object is created. With this, I will say factory dot close. Okay. This message will pop up directly. Okay. So as I'm doing all this over here, I'll have to. Okay, this all is done in the main method. This all is done in the main method. I forgot to put the main method. Public static void main and string args, and this will throws exception. Yes. Throws exception. The class class close. Okay, all set. I need to have a database in shape. By what name? By Spring Core. In that Spring Core, I need to have a table in shape by the name myStud. Okay, so let's create that. So database created by Spring Core. Let's create a table. The table name is myStud. MyStud has three columns. Go, roll number, s name, percentage, roll number integer. Let's give this as text. Let's give this as double, and just make this as a primary key. That's all we need. Save it. Okay, so we have this table myStud over here. As of now, it has no records. All set. Okay. All set. Now let's try to run this. Go to your driver class, right click, run as Java application. A Java exception has occurred. Unsupported major. Okay, we have to choose the JDK version above 1.5. Right click over here, go to build path, configure build path. Java compiler should be more than 1.5, so I take 1.8. Apply and close. Yes. Now do a run on this to driver, right click, run Java application. Here you go, connection has been opened. Insert a roll number, let's say open 18, Virat 98.7%. It says something scanner mismatch. Okay, didn't was not the data be accepted correct. 1 second, let's see over here. Okay, I was expecting a double value. So I should have given a double value over here, double and next double. So yeah, this is what happened over there. Again, right click, run as Java application. Let's see. So now let's enter with Rohit 45, Rohit 98.7. It says record inserted and connection closed. The lifecycle methods were called automatically. Connection close also was called, and connection open was also called. Go to your database, refresh this file, and see if you can see the record. Yes, you can see the record. Record has been inserted. So I've done the lifecycle management using programmatic approach. Okay, so this is my project class, and using these methods of these interfaces after properties set and destroy functions which belong to this interfaces, I've done my lifecycle method management. Okay, now second way of doing this is by the XML. Okay, so we don't have to, in a Pojo class it is not mandatory that we implement any interface. So we will not be doing this second step, and as we are not going to do this, we don't have to override these methods. So I can, but I want to do this task of initialize, right? So I can just give my own methods over here. So what names did I give? My init, my something like that. I can give my name, so I can give my init function, and I can give my destroy. These are my own functions. Now, but I have to go and configure in the bean. Okay, so my init and my destroy. But now I have to go and configure in my bean, right? So I have to in my bean I have to configure my init method and my destroy method and my destroy method. So what is my init method name? My init. And what is my destroy method name? My destroy. Okay, I do a save. Okay, I've done the changes. What changes have I done? Removed my. Now see, these interfaces were imported, right? But they aren't using. So what we can do is we can do a project clean. So when we do a clean, what happens? When we do a clean, all this unwanted stuff is eliminated. So I'm my init throws. So now I'll be using my own methods for the lifecycle management. My init and my destroy. But how does my bean know that? So I've configured that in my bean over here that the init method is my init and the destroy method is this. Now let's try to run this code. Established. Now let's enter Virat over here. 18 Virat 98.9. Record inserted successfully and connection closed. So if you go and refresh this, you will see Virat has been added here also. This is your second technique. And the third technique is using annotation, right? The third technique is using the annotation. So for this we have two annotations. So we don't have to initialize the bean also. So in the bean part, we don't have to do this also. So that we don't have to do this in the bean part. Keep it simple. Okay. All we have to do is the method which we are using for initializing. So this is the method I'm using for initializing. I'll annotate this as post construct, because this will be called after constructor is called up. So post construct, and this I will call before the garbage collector destroys the object. So this will be called pre-destroy. Pre-destroy. This we have to use these two annotations. Import them. And if we are using the annotations approach, we need to have a bean for a class over here, for the config bean. So in this configuration we have to have a bean, and the class name of that bean, the fully qualified class name of the bean we should have. So I'll just tell you what is the name of that bean. So this is the name of that bean, common annotation bean post processor. We should have the fully qualified name of this class, common annotation bean post processor. So let's go to our class, and anywhere if we can import, if we write this, let's say, and create an object of it, it will ask us to import, and while importing we can take the fully qualified name common annotation bean post processor. So common annotation bean post processor, let's just take the fully qualified name of this class and put it in the bean, put it in the, make a bean by this class equals to, and paste it. That's nothing much, just put this. Okay, you just wrote in the class to wanted the fully qualified name, so we aren't using this over here, so we can delete this, and we can delete it from where we had fetched this. We can delete this also. So this way we can use annotations to do our life cycle. So this function will as a post destroy, that this post construct will act as an initialization, and pre-destroy will act as a destroy. But what is the prerequisite for that? And we have to make a bean class for this entire fully qualified name of this common annotation bean post process. Okay. Done. Right click, run as Java application. Let's see how this responds. Connection established. 17 ABD 99.8 inserted. So we go to the database to make sure, and so all three records have been inserted. So we've done this using all the three various steps: programmatic approach, XML approach, and annotation approach also.